His name was Stephen. He was the perfect guy. I mean, everyone wanted to be him. He went to college young, was successful in his career, and had a nice family. But all that came crashing down the day he died. You see, Stephen didn't die in a car accident or any other usual way. Stephen died by suicide. Stephen Capello, my father, joined thousands of other Americans who've taken their own lives. Stephen's death was tragic and possibly preventable. Merriam-Webster's online dictionary defines suicide as the act or instance of intentionally taking one's own life. But the definition itself is a little murky. A recent study by the... Oh my gosh. I haven't done this in a while. I'm sorry.
Make it up.
A recent study by the National Institute of Mental Health reveals that over 90% of suicide victims suffer from one or more mental disorders, which can heavily alter one's thoughts. In fact, changing their intentions as the definition implies. Many suicide victims who are fortunate enough to live through their experience often ask why they tried to kill themselves in the first place. My father is one of such people. Frequently after each of his attempts, I would find him asking my mother and I, "Why did I do that? I don't want to kill myself. I love my life." I often found myself asking similar questions. Why would he do that? What made him think those things? Such disorders have been clinically linked to brain chemicals called neurotransmitters, such as serotonin. Decreased serotonin levels have been found in victims of depression, impulsive disorders, and those with a history of suicide. Such disorders, if left untreated, can have tremendous impacts on one's psychological or physical health. Such disorders can change families and lives, like Stephen's. Every year in the United States, over 800,000 acts of suicide are attempted. Of these 800,000, some 33,000 result in death, and an estimated 750,000 Americans are admitted to hospitals across the nation due to suicide attempt-related injuries. In addition to this, thousands upon thousands of family members, more commonly known as survivors, are left behind to deal with this trauma, leaving them prone to similar emotional tendencies and depression. Now, despite these alarming facts, there is still a failure to acknowledge suicide as a public health issue. Also, people are quite hesitant to talk about the topic, clinically called a stigma. To further show the direness of the situation, I offer you the following statistic. 1 American dies by means of suicide every 16 minutes. Now, according to this, 3 Americans will claim their own lives during the course of this oratory round. 75 will attempt. And sadly, this number is only increasing. In the state of Wyoming alone, we have a suicide rate that is staggering 60% higher than the national average. But how do we face this issue? How do we address it? Despite the facts I've given you, there's still a failure to acknowledge suicide as a public health issue. Even though, in the past 15 years, suicide deaths have outpaced HIV and AIDS-related deaths by 30%. Even though 20% of Americans in their lifetimes will experience a suicide within their immediate family. Even though 60% of Americans will themselves become survivors by suffering the pain caused from losing a close friend or loved one at some point during their lives. This lack of acknowledgement, so to speak, is the main contributor to the stigma that is suicide. Ever since my father died 2 years ago, the topic has conveniently seemed to elude conversation whenever I'm around. And if it does come up, my closer friends will quickly hint to change the subject. Author Eric Marie Remarque makes the point that the more you think about something, the more it will destroy you. But perhaps this is the problem with our country. Outreach to people prone to suicide is possibly the #1 means of prevention. Also, if we never address the topic, it will never be discussed or solved. This is why we should make eliminating the stigma associated with suicide our first priority. Now, sadly, this topic may seem very familiar to people like you and I walk down the halls of my high school every day, knowing that many people around me are suicidal. To some of you, this may sound shocking, but to others, so sadly familiar. The Youth Risk Evaluation Survey undertaken by the Wyoming Department of Education in the past year reveals a staggering 20% of Wyoming high school students have seriously contemplated suicide. Among the same student body, 15% had created a plan in which they would take their own lives, with 10% of the student body acting upon those plans. Now, according to this, 1 out of every 10 Wyoming high school students has tried to kill themselves, with double that many exhibiting serious suicidal behavior. Let's stop and take a moment. Think about your team. Think about your classmates. Statistically, coming from a team of 30, 6 of my fellow friends and competitors are suicidal. This scares me. I've heard from various sources throughout my community, the news, television, that we are the next generation of America's youth. We will be the ones determining the fate of this country over the next century, and possibly this world. But we need to be the ones to determine the safety and stability of this upcoming generation. The suicide rate is a downward spiral, with the death rate increasing exponentially. The more deaths there are within age groups, the more prone people around them are to similar tendencies and depression, clinically titled contagion. Now, this brings me to the end of today's sad story, where thousands of family members across America are opening letters addressed to whom it may concern. Where we have to ask ourselves, what can we do to stop this issue? I could tell you the same thing as everyone else. That being, to petition your senator, or something similar to that effect. But I ask you to do something a lot more simple than that. Just be aware. As teens especially, we are in a unique position to help our friends and peers when others may not be able to do so. Less than 20% of youth contemplating suicide confide these thoughts to an adult. Also, given this feeling of closeness, you may be able to pick up on key issues that teachers, parents, or even counselors may overlook. A simple acronym to remember to help assess whether or not someone is at risk is the term IS, PASS, WARN. IS, I, ideation, S, substance abuse, PASS, P, purposelessness, A, anxiety, T, trap, H, hopelessness, and WARN. W, withdrawal, A, anger, R, recklessness, and M, mood changes. All of these are definite signs of suicide. So talk to them. People have a certain willingness to share things with their friends and peers, and if you believe it's necessary, contact someone who is in the situation to help. Many people are easily intimidated by the thought that a friend or a coworker is considering suicide. They believe that being wrong could be embarrassing. But being right could save a life. I am a survivor. I'm standing here today to tell you what can be done. Whether I walk out of this room with a 2, a 6, a 4 circled on that ballot, it doesn't really matter. What does matter is that we can make a difference. We can be the ones to address this problem. We can discuss the taboo. We can simply lend a hand to someone who's feeling down. Or, we could be helping to save that person from the world around them. We can make that world free of suicide. And I hope you can see that too. Thank you.